Hope you're wrapping up the week nicely. I'm Daniel Che here to provide you with the latest. Let's start with the headlines. Korea's second largest umbrella union is leading a nationwide strike to protest the government's push for structural reforms in the labor sector. The government calls the action illegal and refuses to back down. President Park Geun-hye is in Brazil to meet with President Dilma Rousseff for the first time. They'll discuss ways to strengthen relations between the two countries. 25 American lawmakers, some Democrats, some Republicans, have urged Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to face history and quit denying state responsibility for the country's wartime atrocities. The tens of thousands of unionized workers in Korea, upset with the government's plans to reform labor regulations, have walked off their jobs. The conflict between the government and unions peaked after they failed to reach an agreement on key reforms earlier this month. The unions say they will hold demonstrations and continue striking until their demands are met. The government says it has no intentions of backing down, calling the strikes illegal, and they vowed to deal with them in the strongest way possible. Let's connect to our Kim Ji-yeon standing by at the Seoul Plaza. Ji-yeon, so far I believe it's been relatively peaceful.
Daniel, just a few hours ago, there was a nationwide labor strike in the Seoul City Plaza, but there wasn't a single violent clash between demonstrators and government authorities here. Some had feared there might be violence as the government and the workers and the union reps were increasingly angry towards the government as both sides failed to agree on key labor reforms earlier this month. But the sheer scale of the protest has shown just how serious the labor unions and the workers are about communicating their demands to the government. The Confederation of Trade Unions, the country's second largest umbrella union, estimates that around 260,000 protesters has gathered here in across 16 regions across the country. And here I've seen flags and signs of a wide spectrum from metal, construction, public servants, and even teachers. Daniel.
Well, Ji-yeon, thankfully it is peaceful so far. What about their needs and wants? What do the protests want? Could you list them out for us?
Well, there are 4 points. First, they want the government to create more quality jobs. That was a campaign pledge made by President Park Geun-hye. They're not happy with the way the government has been approaching this issue, saying that their approach to revitalizing the labor market has called for more flexibility in the labor market. And they say that approach will increase the number of irregular positions, making it easier for employers to lay off workers while lowering the wages. And also, second, they want a pay hike in the minimum wage from just over $5, the current $5 to just over $9. And third, they want an end to the government's push for reforming the public pension system, the reform of a pension system for public servants. And lastly, they want all laborers, regardless of which position, whether they're irregular or irregular positions, to be protected under the country's Labor Standard Act, which states that managers need justifiable grounds to dismiss them.
Okay,
Daniel.
Quite clear. What about the employees and the governments? They seem pretty adamant at first. How are they responding so far?
Well, lukewarm at best to these demands, although Finance Minister Choi Kyung-han has addressed some of these concerns that were raised today by the protesters to business leaders, and did express some support from a limited increase in the minimum wage. But business leaders, including Park Yong-man, the head of the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry, says that's a no-go right now, and with this sluggish economy. He says that with increasing wages would only hamper Korea's competitiveness in the international scale, and said it would hamper the country's exports. This is all I have for now. I'm Kim Ji-yeon reporting live at the Seoul Plaza on the nationwide labor strike.
Thank you for that, Ji-yeon. Let's move on to the latest on the investigation into the so-called Seongwanjeong bribery list. Prosecutors have found that significant evidence has been hidden or destroyed by the late businessman's close aides. Park Jun-ho and Lee Yong-gi, who handled Sung's political affairs for about a decade. Lee was arrested late Thursday night on suspicions of destroying evidence following 2 days of questioning, and Park was taken into custody earlier this week. However, they were both arrested on an emergency basis without warrants. Prosecutors have filed for a warrant for Park, and the court will make a decision on the validity of this request on Friday afternoon. While the prosecutors await that decision, the bribery scandal is still rippling through the National Assembly. Both rival parties have agreed to appoint a team of independent counsel to get to the bottom of the allegations. But according to our Park Ji-won, they're now wrangling over how those special prosecutors should be selected.
Although both parties agree on the necessity of introducing special prosecutors, they differ on how this should happen. The ruling Saenuri Party hopes to implement a standing special prosecutor law, which passed the assembly last year. Party leader Yoo Seung-min said on Friday that they'd like to appoint special counsel as soon as possible to dispel allegations surrounding the Conservative Party and its high-profile politicians named on the so-called bribery list. However, the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy wants to create a new set of appointment procedures negotiated by the rival parties. Liberal Party leader Moon Jae-in stressed that the established procedure of appointing special prosecutors cannot guarantee the investigation's impartiality. The NPAD says the standing law is favorable to the ruling Saenuri Party and the presidential office, as the appointments would require a majority vote at the assembly, and currently the Saenuri Party has a majority in parliament. With the rival parties facing off on this issue, April's parliamentary session has reached a standstill, leaving other businesses unresolved. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
In other news, a 2-day early voting period for next Wednesday as by-elections open this morning in 4 constituencies electing new lawmakers next week. The early voting system, first introduced 2 years ago, is aimed at raising turnouts by giving those who are unable to vote on the actual day of the elections extra time to cast their ballots. Voters in the constituencies can pop into their nearest polling stations with their resident registration cards between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. this Friday and Saturday. 4 National Assembly seats are up for grabs, 1 each in Gwanak-B district in Seoul, Incheon, Gyeonggi-do province, and the southwestern city of Gwangju. 3 seats were vacated by the dissolution of the ultra-leftist Unified Progressive Party late last year. The other was left empty after ruling party lawmaker was sentenced to jail. President Park Geun-hye is now in Brazil, the 4th and final leg of her South America tour. Before departing Chile on Thursday, local time, she checked up on Korea's Antarctic Research Station by speaking on the phone to its leader. Our Choi Yoo-sun has the details.
Connecting to An In-young, the head of Korea's Antarctic King Sejong Station, by phone in Santiago, President Park Geun-hye acknowledged all 17 researchers' hard work in such unfavorable conditions.
어려운 환경 속에서 정말 고생이 많습니다. 그래도 임무 수행에 최선을 다하고 있는 여러분의 노고에 감사를 드립니다.
The president then asked about the team's well-being.
극한지에서 생활하는 대원들 건강도 걱정이 되는데 요즘 우리 대원들 생활은 어떻습니까?
Thanking the government and Korean people for their support, An said they mostly spend the winter season indoors, during which the wind chill drops temperatures to minus 40 degrees Celsius, but that they try to stay fit and active. The Sejong Station, which first opened on Antarctica's King George Island in 1988, studies climate change and organisms' ability to adapt to cold temperatures. A day earlier, Korea and Chile signed a deal to jointly study the Antarctic.
이번에 양국 간의 남극 정책 대화를 개시하게 된 점을 기쁘게 생각합니다.
The president then asked An to successfully lead her team's mission and ensure the team return home safely after wrapping up their work. Later on Thursday, President Park arrived in Brazil, the final stop on her South America tour.
Meeting Brazil's first female president, Dilma Rousseff, for the first time, President Park plans to discuss strengthening their bilateral cooperative partnership and seek more business opportunities for Korean firms in the world's 7th largest economy. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News, Brasilia.
And with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit to the United States just days away, a group of American lawmakers have joined the chorus of voices calling for him to make a formal apology for Japan's actions during World War II. Our Connie Kim has more.
25 members of the U.S. Congress have urged Abe to squarely face history and formally reaffirm and validate conclusions expressed in Japan's previous Kono and Murayama statements. Both were formal apologies for the country's wartime sexual enslavement and colonialism. The lawmakers, a mix of Democrats and Republicans, issued the call in a letter to the Japanese ambassador to the U.S., Kenichiro Sasai. A diplomatic source told Seoul-based Yonhap news agency that the move is highly unusual, considering that it's coming from both political parties. Earlier this week at a conference in Jakarta, the Abe administration continued to deny state responsibility for the country's past wrongdoings. In his speech, the prime minister stopped short of an apology, instead offering an expression of remorse for Japan's involvement in World War II. This year marks the 70th anniversary of the end of the war, and victims of Japanese military sexual enslavement feel that an apology is long overdue. Speaking at a conference in Washington, Lee Yong-soo said she was 14 when she was taken by Japanese soldiers. She's now 86 and said that Abe must face the truth of his country's crimes against women.
Abe wants all the victims of sexual enslavement to die. But I will not die. I will resolve this issue, get an apology from Abe, be compensated, and then die.
Of the approximately 200,000 women forced into sexual enslavement, the majority from Korea, just 53 are still alive and waiting for Japan's apology. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
South Korea's Unification Ministry says Seoul plans to penalize companies that paid wages to the North Korean workers at the Kaesong Industrial Complex. In a meeting with a group of South Korean Kaesong businessmen, Vice Unification Minister Hwang Buk-yi said the government will take necessary actions against these firms after reviewing why they violated the government's guidelines. North Korea unilaterally hiked wages for its workers in February. South Korea says the issue must be settled through government-level talks and asked companies not to pay any wages until a resolution has been achieved. However, over 10 out of the 124 companies have reportedly paid their workers. Hwang also called on the officials to join the government's efforts to resolve the wage row. North Korea's ceremonial head of state Kim Young-nam has been very active at the 60th Asia-Africa Summit in Indonesia. Pyongyang's Korean Central News Agency reported Friday that Kim held a series of meetings, including sessions with his Madagascan, Rwandan, and Venezuelan counterparts. Earlier in the week, he condemned the U.S. during his speech at the two-day summit in Bandung, Jakarta, calling Washington, quote, a human rights wasteland and the country with the most number of nuclear weapons. He said it was ridiculous for the U.S. to criticize North Korea for its human rights situation and the regime's nuclear programs. Moving on to other stories, tourism is the hottest industry in the Korean economy lately, and it's fueled by Chinese travelers. That's what Korea's Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan said today as he was visiting the popular southern island of Jeju, pointing out that Chinese tourists enjoy shopping in Korea and tend to visit Seoul and Jeju Island. Building sufficient infrastructure to meet those needs are key to boosting the industry. He added that the government will roll out a comprehensive plan to revive the tourism sector within the first half of this year. South Korea may be one of the wealthiest nations in the world, but in terms of happiness, the country still has a long way to go. On Thursday, the United Nations released its 2015 World Happiness Report, and Korea ranked 47th out of 158 countries. That's a 6th-place drop from the year 2013 when Korea was in 41st place. The rankings compiled by the Sustainable Development Solutions Network were based on a variety of factors, including GDP and healthy life expectancy. People were also asked to rate their lives on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being the best possible life and 0 being the worst. Korea's average was 5.984, right below Japan at 5.987. Switzerland topped the list with more than 7 points, while Togo came in last with less than 3 points. Arirang TV has sealed yet another exchange deal with a South American TV network. The latest agreement with a popular Brazilian channel comes hot on the heels of a similar deal signed earlier this week with Peru's largest TV network. Park Ki-ju files this report from Sao Paulo.
Arirang TV is taking greater strides to enter the South American TV market, adding Brazil to its list of partnership countries. Korea's global broadcaster has sealed an MOU with Brazil's hasn TV that will explore opportunities for joint production, program, and personnel exchanges. Established in 1999, hasn TV is considered a relatively new player in the Brazilian TV industry, but is known for its creative contents aimed at younger viewers. It's also far-reaching, with the channel's transmission range covering 85% of the country. Arirang TV and hasn TV, which means network in Portuguese, will also focus on exchanging contents on the business front and on ICT trends.
We believe Asia is the continent of future where tradition and technologies coexist. We are particularly interested in Korean TV contents like K-pop, which is taking the world by storm. We are also eager to exchange news coverage, which will enhance our journalistic scope.
President Park Geun-hye's visit to the country this week is also expected to pique the Brazilian people's interest in Korea. There are thought to be around 250,000 fans of Hallyu, or the Korean wave in Brazil, accounting for a quarter of all Hallyu fans in South America. Arirang TV's latest exchange deal with Brazil's fifth largest broadcaster will further expand its reach to the rising number of K-pop and Korean culture fans here on the South American continent. Park Ki-ju, Arirang News, Sao Paulo.
And that's all from us. More at 10 p.m. Korea time. Do join us then. Thank you for watching.